Imagine waking up and seeing the number next to your XRP bag jump 200-fold overnight. Yeah, I thought that would get your heart racing. So, here's the rabbit hole that we're diving into today. What if XRP, little old XRP, absorbed every liquid dollar in the United States, every crumpled bill, every checking account balance, the whole M1 money supply? Now we're talking about numbers so big that they make national GDPs look like pocket change. And I promise, this isn't some kind of midlight fever dream, right? The data is real, the math checks out, and by the end, you're going to know exactly why people are throwing around price tags like $186 or even $316 per coin, and how much cold reality stands in the way. First, the table stakes. The Federal Reserve's own 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗔𝗥𝗘 report puts US M1 at roughly $18.46 trillion as of January 2025, nudging higher to $18.56 trillion by March. Now that's every physical bill and coin plus the instant tap-to-pay money waiting inside demand deposits. It's the fastest cash in the economy, the stuff that actually buys groceries and fuels Black Friday sprees. Now, compare that fire hose of liquidity to XRP's current puddle. Well, the live quote hovers around $2.12 at the point of recording. Let's just call it $2.12 for easy math, with about 58.5 billion tokens doing the rounds. Now that puts the circulating market cap in the kind of $124 billion ballpark. It's nice, but it's still a mosquito buzzing next to a blue whale. So, here's the moonshot calculation that the article has laid down. If XRP's market cap somehow matched that $18.46 trillion M1 mountain, well, each coin would need to stretch its draw-dropping levels, or at least two draw-dropping levels. Now, when you kind of spread that valuation across the entire 99.98 billion total supply, you land at roughly $186 per XRP. Now, if you restrict it to the circulating 58.39 billion tokens, well, the price spikes to a staggering $316. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, numbers are fun. But is it even remotely possible outside a Marvel multiverse? Well, let's chew on the logic for just a second. Picture every dollar of physical cash and every checking account balance migrating onto Ripple's ledger. That's grandma's cookie jar quarters, your employer's payroll float, the local diner's tip jar, all represented as kind of tiny sparks of XRP powered liquidity. Now that's not just a tech upgrade, it's a cultural rewrite. Now the US population would need to trust a blockchain token as deeply as they trust George Washington's face on a green piece of cotton blend. And for perspective, we still can't convince half the country to download a parking meter app. But tech adoption curves can be sneaky. Remember how contactless cards felt futuristic in 2015? Well, fast forward and toddlers are waving phones at vending machines like mini Jedi. Now, Ripple's pitch, fast, cheap, cross-border transfers, slides neatly into that trend. Now, if banks and payment companies and maybe one brave central bank starts settling in XRP, you can imagine a bit of a snowball effect. Analyst projections include that daydream, right? Changeley's research desk thinks XRP could brush $186 as early as January 2040 and potentially graze $315 by February 2040. Now, numbers eerily close to our M1 targets. Meanwhile, of course, Tarragon plays the skeptic, right? Tapping 2040's kind of upside near around $160 and pushing an eventual $186 tag out towards mid-century with, $315 filed under never say never, but probably not. So let's go ahead and pump those brakes and talk about the challenges. Because every good hero's journey needs a dragon, right? Regulatory friction tops the list. Ripple's courtroom tango with the SEC may be quieter these days, yet the US policymakers still eye crypto with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Now, convincing regulators that the nation's entire cash stockpile should rest on a ledger, partially kind of stewarded by a private company, well, that's Mount Everest in a headwind. Supply dynamics are another snag. Unlike Bitcoin's fixed 21 million, XRP's supply sits near 100 billion, with periodic kind of escrow unlocks as well. Now, unless a massive burn or locked scheme tilts the scarcity equation, each coin's slice of the pie stays fairly thin. So hitting triple-digit prices would demand a Niagara-level surge of new demand, not just a mild uptick. And don't forget competition. Stablecoin issuers, CBDCs, and rival settlement networks are all swinging for the same fences. Now, if the Fed ever rolls out a digital dollar, you could soak up liquidity long before XRP gets an invite to the party. And yet, optimism clings to the asset for a reason. RippleNet already partners with hundreds of institutions worldwide. On-demand liquidity volumes keep posting double-digit growth, and cross-border fees savings, are too juicy for CFOs to ignore. Each new corridor carves, say US dollar to Philippines pesos, pushes XRP a fraction closer to mainstream credibility. It's like adding new stations to a metro line, right? Ride, ship, snowballs once kind of enough stops appear on the map. So let me ground this in with a personal snapshot then. A few weeks ago, I paid a freelance designer in Europe. My bank wanted 3 business days and a fee that looked like a luxury tax surcharge. Instead, I zapped USDC to an exchange, swapped it to XRP, and the guy had spendable euros before my kettle finished boiling. Right, that microscopic victory is what fuels Believer Talk. Right, you multiply that friction-free experience by millions of business invoices and migrant remittances, and suddenly the $124 billion market cap doesn't look so crazy. Still, hijacking the entire M1 supply? That's the equivalent of asking every barista to pour oat milk with a blindfold, right? You can imagine it, but the spillage would be legendary. So let's stretch the lens even further, right? Even if Ripple somehow cornered the US liquidity, the M1 represents only one slice of the global money cake. Worldwide M1 hovers well above $50 trillion. So our $186 to $316 targets would balloon even higher if adoption truly went planetary. Now, of course, by then, inflation, monetary expansion, and who knows what geopolitical shakeups would move the kind of goalposts anyway. And so, where does that leave the average holder, stacking a few hundred XRP hoping to retire early? Well, here's the balanced take. You've got long-term adoption that could push XRP into high double digits, especially if legal clarity and big-name partnerships keep stacking. Triple-digit prices need macro-level shifts, seismic banking integration, maybe even XRP-baked stablecoins acting as the digital grease for commerce. And a full one-to-one match with the US M1 is a mathematical possibility, but a kind of social political hurricane of a task. Now, if you enjoy unpacking these what-if scenarios and want to bounce ideas off traders who spend way too much time with spreadsheets, why don't you swing by our free crypto Discord? There's a link in the description down below. I'm in there pretty much every single day, swapping charts, dad jokes, and the occasional cafe picture when the caffeine really hits. All right, let's hit the crescendo. Imagine January 2040 rolls around and XRP's blinking at $186. That means a 1,000 coin bag, something that costs a modest $2,000 today, is suddenly worth a down payment on a beachfront condo. If it ever stretches to $316, that same bag could buy a small island or at least a lifetime supply of avocado toast. A joke, of course. Now, the point isn't to kind of guarantee those numbers. It's to illustrate how exponential math collides with real-world adoption curves. At the end of the day, crypto is a giant experiment. Sometimes the lab explodes, sometimes it cures a disease. XRP's M1 moment, it sits on the far edge of the probability bell curve, but understanding it forces us to ask sharper questions about value, money, and the tech rails that move, both around. So here's a quick recap before we wrap up today. US M1 is at roughly $18.5 trillion. XRP at just over $2 today. Potential price tags of $186 to $316 if, and it's a big if, the token soaks up that entire liquidity pool. Analysts' kind of outlooks kind of range from wildly bullish to cautiously optimistic, and the road between is kind of paved with regulatory intrigue, supply mechanics, and the relentless pursuit of innovation.